Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
My first experience at a frat party, I went with a bunch of my girlfriends. It was super crowded. I would say within the first 5 minutes, I was already on my own. I was just alone the whole time. I got to meet a couple people, but for the most part, I was alone and I was over it after the first 20 minutes.
Hello and welcome to Seven on Sundays, the podcast about how young adults are navigating sex, relationships, and life today.
We are your hosts, Dr. Chez, Leeby, and Stephanie Boye, and each week we will share our candid conversations with young adults and experts about today's tough topics.
Today, we are talking to a sophomore at a big public university out west. Her pseudonym is Hanna. And Dr. Chez and I wanted to dig in with her and hear about the social life of a female student who's not in a sorority. What does that look like? What are these experiences of going to frat parties? How do you make connections if you're not part of Greek life? What I know from talking to students is that a big part of freshman year can feel lonely. So as a parent, and as a student, I'm sure this is scary and upsetting. And we wanted to understand the draw to go to these parties, which obviously is pretty significant if you feel lonely and isolated, or, you want to meet people and create your community. So the desire to participate is pretty huge. So we dig in with Hanna trying to figure out, what does this life look like?
Yes, I love Hannah's valuable insight about what it looks like and also how to kind of maintain your strength in standing up to things like non-consensual groping that we learned happens, the disillusionment of these hookups and the hookup culture that feels to some like a rite of passage, but they're not comfortable with it. Hanna shares that, for her little sister, she would say, don't get caught up in it. And we explore more of what that means. And also, ways to help students navigate the college social life while staying true to themselves. I think this is something that many kids can relate to. Let's jump right into Hannah's story.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Hanna. We are really excited to hear what you have to say about college parties, which Dr. Chez and I talked to you a little bit before, and so we're excited to jump in. Thank you for sharing your insight with us.
Yes, of course. I'm happy to be here.
Maybe you can start with what year you are and why this was a topic that was of particular interest to you and that you thought belonged on a platform, keeping in mind, as Dr. Chez and I told you, that these stories that we tell on this podcast are meant to be something that maybe gives students who are in high school some insight to what to expect. Maybe it's something that will resonate with other college students and make them feel less alone. Because I know one thing, no one is alone. You say something and you feel like there's no one else in the world who feels that way. But when you talk about this, you are literally healing other people, or at least letting them feel, less, on their own in these feelings and experiences. So
My name's Hanna. I go to a school on the West Coast, and I'm a sophomore currently. Coming to college, I had a lot of high expectations, and I think that my priorities were kind of set a lot different than they are currently. I was super excited to experience college life, including parties, frat parties, all that kind of sort of things. But then once I actually did experience it, I kind of realized the more underlining uncomfortable things that happen at frat parties. And now my whole perspective has changed and I don't attend frat parties anymore. I'm not a big fan of Greek life. I am still supportive with some aspects of it, but overall, it's not for me anymore.
are you in a sorority yourself?
I'm not. No.
Did that appeal to you, the sorority life?
In the beginning, it did for the aspect of meeting new people, but I kind of heard stories through the whole recruitment process and A lot of my friends went through recruitment for sororities and frats, and it just kind of, scared me away and kind of took me more away from it. But I also always know that since I am a girl, I can still go to the frat parties. So I wasn't as interested.
I think that is a big draw for young women that are going to college. And I think that's exactly why this conversation is important. If I went to one of those big universities, I probably would also be someone who'd be like, oh, I could go to these parties.
Let's step back then. Forget the parties. What are the things, because I want to know that too, but what are the things that you heard that turned you off? Like you're in the middle of recruitment, you're ready. And what is it that somebody had the honesty to share with you about, hey, here's kind of what it's like?
So I knew a lot of girls who were rushing for the fall semester of my freshman year. Everyone had different stories, obviously, but one that really stuck out to me was one of my close friends. You like bid for your sororities and you put your top sororities and stuff. And she would go through recruitment and, show a lot of interest to these sororities. She would talk to a lot of girls. She would feel really welcomed. And then it's more so they were so easily able to just kind of drop her and never get back to her and not really give her a reasoning either. And that kind of just leaves you to think like, oh, why was I not welcomed back by the sorority, but this person was? And I just saw how she dealt with that and how she took it super personally, as I feel like a lot of girls do. So just, witnessing that and experiencing that made me think maybe I should not rush spring semester, because I was going to for second semester of my freshman year. I was thinking about it, but after just her opening up to me about how it made her feel and stuff, it just made me, scared to ever have to feel that way or not feel welcomed or not good enough for a certain sorority.
Is your school, are sororities and fraternities a big part of the college experience?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I want to actually point this out because statistically speaking, I know what school you go to. They actually are not very big at your school.
Oh, really?
But I think that that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you will feel when you're a junior and a senior, because you'll be able to drink and do other things outside of like Greek life. But it's interesting to hear the perspective. Like in your school, I think it's only 10% of the population is in Greek life. Although I know, that probably includes, it's a big school. So
Right.
there's other campuses and things like that. So maybe in your particular part of the campus, it feels like it's a bigger part of Greek, Greek life is bigger than it is.
Right.
But I think that that's actually a very interesting thing to hear, that even
Yeah.
with a small percentage of Greek life, like Dr. Chez's daughter goes to a school that it's over 50% or just under 50%, right around 50%. And there, I think it must feel like every single person is absolutely in a sorority or a fraternity.
Oh, totally. And I think a lot of the thing is too, even if you're not involved in Greek life, like you're not in a sorority or a fraternity, you're super involved in the sense that you go to frat parties and you do the wine Wednesdays and you go to the Greek leadership village and you are around it enough. So I think also that's why I feel like it's like a
Yeah.
bigger thing at my school, just because it's, frats
Yeah.
are such a thing and stuff like that.
I've never heard of Greek leadership. What did you call it? Greek leadership something?
It's Greek
Village?
leadership village. It's a lot for some universities. Their like frat houses can get, shut down by like cops and stuff. And so I don't really know exactly how it works, but it's basically just like an apartment, if you will, for certain frats and certain sororities, and then they rent out houses to throw their parties.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Oh, that's
I was
interesting.
excited to hear the word leadership. I thought, oh,
Not quite the leadership you're thinking about.
doing leadership in the community, but okay, something totally different. Okay, so did you hear any stories of hazing that scared you? Have you heard about that stuff?
Yeah, it's a little tricky just because when like fraternities do go through hazing, I don't think that sororities do, but when fraternities go through hazing, they're not supposed to be sharing anything. However, I did have a close friend, rush for a fraternity, and he opened up about some of the things that they did after he was initiated or whatever. And yeah, they were pretty scary. They were like, making kids drink, obviously. They would kids sit in a like really hot garage in the beginning of August, right when they got there. It was pretty brutal for them.
Okay, so there's the Greek life. So you've chosen, good for you, of making your own choices. You've chosen to not be part of something that, you don't need, and you don't want to do that. But you can go to fraternity parties. So tell us what it's like as a freshman walking in to a fraternity party. Like, do you go with friends, and what happens?
Yeah, so my first experience at a frat party, I went with a bunch of my girlfriends. There was like 6 of us going. It's kind of hard to go with your friends just because frat parties are very, very crowded. So you can always go with a group of people, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be next to them the whole time. So my first experience joining or going to a frat party, we all went. It was super crowded. I would say within the first 5 minutes, I was already like on my own. Also, the first frat I went was actually inside. So it was dark except for the like disco ball lights and stuff. So I really could not make out faces. But yeah, I was just alone the whole time. I got to meet a couple people, but for the most part, I was alone and I was over it after the first like 20 minutes. It's just super crammed. You're body to body with people. It can be kind of uncomfortable sometimes, depending on, who's around you. So the first frat experience for me was not the best. I didn't actually start somewhat enjoying going to frat parties until I actually knew people in a frat.
What were the things that were
Yeah,
uncomfortable?
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say, yeah, what is the, we often, so I'll speak like for parents, we often hear, about, how other people will treat girls, that being alone as a freshman in a place where there's, fraternity boys can be dangerous. Did you feel that element of like, ooh, I feel a little bit like I don't have control over, something could happen and I don't really have a lot of control, especially if you're that quickly getting separated from your friends? I think that's a little bit daunting.
Totally. I think it was around the 3rd time I went to a frat. It was a super I wanna say it was like a Valentine's Day theme or something. It was for some holiday, and it was super crowded, and there were a couple different guys who would come up, and they'll, like I've witnessed it with other girls, but I also experienced it myself. They'll come up behind you and, like, put their hands on your waist and, like, progressively just kinda get lower until, like, get all touchy-feely, and it feels really uncomfortable because since it is such a crowded room, it's hard to do anything besides say, "Hey, like, stop touching me," you know what I mean? You can't really just like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go over there and, like, leave him," because it's so crammed. So I've definitely witnessed that a couple times, I've experienced it, my friends have experienced it, and it's just super uncomfortable because you don't wanna be the person to be like to turn around and be like, "Hey, stop," but now I obviously get a good, excuse to because I'm in a relationship, but when you're not and you're just, there, it's hard to turn around for a lot of girls too. You don't wanna be the person to turn around and be like, "Hey, I don't this is making me uncomfortable, I don't like this." And then, they get upset or something like that.
This actually makes me think. Okay, so obviously we had talked before about what we were going to talk about. And I think that's interesting, first of all, because how many guys can be in a fraternity to have that many people crammed into a house? Are there people, like, obviously the girls aren't in the fraternity. Are there also guys who aren't part of the fraternity that are in these parties?
No, so they only allow members of the frat to be at the frat parties just for reasons of like, like if someone drugs a girl or whatever, it would be bad on their name, and then obviously they could get shut down as a frat, and so they only let members of the frat join fraternity or frat parties.
Okay, so that makes sense. Oh, like like something you said, like you're in a relationship, so now you have a reason to turn around and say something. I actually think I'm not saying you're wrong in any way, but I think that that's a really interesting phenomenon that in that relationship you feel confident to turn around and say, "Get your hands off of me."
Oh,
But
yeah.
when you're not in that relationship, you're afraid to speak up for yourself.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, like, everyone knows everyone, and so, I mean, I've used, like, even when prior to being in a relationship, I've been like, "Oh, sorry, I have a boyfriend," but in Greek life, sometimes it's hard to, use that, like, as an excuse or as, like, a, "Stop touching me, I have a boyfriend," because everyone knows everyone, and so all it takes is for that guy to go up to one of your friends and be like, "Yo, is your friend in a relationship, like she's cute. And then for them to be like, oh, no, she's not. She's single.
But even still, they don't have a right to have their hands on your body. You know what I mean? Like it's really more about like they don't have a right to your body. And I'm not saying this as a condemnation of you in any way. I'm saying it females in general. I'm wondering whether, when we had talked before, we talked about the difference in the energy or the vibe when you're in a fraternity house versus a bar, because the same type of behavior could happen in a bar. But I'm just trying to like kind of dig into the psychology of this a little bit. And I'm thinking that the reason when you're not in a relationship and you feel like you can't speak up for yourself, it's because it's a power differential. You need this party because you need to be connected to social life. Yet the people who are running this party are all basically together. So if you mess with one of them and be like, hey, get off, and they kick you out, you're essentially kicked out of this social life.
Oh, yeah. And you can also get a bad reputation. There's this thing called blacklist from frats. So it's like, if you did piss off a guy at a frat or you did say no, basically, you can get blacklisted from a frat. And that goes around. It's horrible. That happened to one of my friends, not because, she said no to a guy, but you can get blacklisted from a party. And it basically not like ruins your reputation, but it just is like, oh, well, I don't ever want to go out now ever again.
Well, this is what I'm talking about. This is crazy. Like,
Right.
like this is the way you silence and you intimidate people. This is a way of silencing and intimidating people.
Yeah.
That a freshman, like when power dynamics are so important here. One, you're in there, you're young. Most of these other people are sophomores, juniors, seniors. So you are the young person. You're a female in a largely male dominated space. These are all people who are in it together. It's like going into a family. It's like going into a family's home and then starting a fight with someone in the family. Like you're literally already, at a disadvantage, right?
Yeah. And it's also like, too, when guys do approach girls at frats, it's never like, oh, hi, how are you? What's your name? What year are you? It's always I'm looking completely opposite direction and some random person is now touching my waist. So it's like even if there are like, junior frat guys at this party and my freshman self is at the party, I have no idea if that guy was, 20 years old or like 21 years old. I have no idea. So that's another thing that's like really uncomfortable too. It's like those guys that do come up to you, you don't even hear their voice before they start touching your waist sometimes.
No.
So the hello is a grope. Does it go beyond the waist? Like, have you heard of that happening? Are people like, groping other, freshman women sexually beyond the waist?
From what I've heard, like through my friends, it's mostly just, grabbing the waist and maybe, groping in like the sense of like touching someone's butt and stuff. But then there's also the times where like, people are making out in the corner and it's really just all out there. But
You're saying once they've gone to the point of being like maybe being interested in a guy,
right,
what you see is very,
very,
I don't want to say aggressive. I don't think that's the right term, but I think what you're saying is it's like it's basically like it doesn't matter if there are other people there.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah, they totally are. It's almost like as if they're just in their own little world over there.
Okay.
I mean, the other thing with everything you're saying is this does set up such an interesting dynamic. And for freshmen who are so young, and obviously nobody tells you going into college, okay, so at a fraternity party, you have the right to say, excuse me, don't touch me, whatever. And then this fear of being blacklisted. And the blacklist thing, I think, has been around for a very, very long time, especially if a girl ever does come against a fraternity person who has done something wrong. Yeah, they're going to make sure that that's on a list, which is very scary because that disempowers your voice too. So I'm kind of like, so what's a girl to do? So you're supposed to just kind of, if you're going to go to a party, which means being social, then you just have to kind of put up with that as your mindset.
Yeah, I mean, for me, specifically, once I experienced that, I just stopped going. But I mean, other girls, I think they just kind of, which is sad, I think they just kind of, put up with it, and they just assume this is just how all frats are. This is what happens. Like, it's inevitable. You're going to get touched, which, I think some girls like might even not obviously like that, but they might take that as, a boost of confidence in the sense that there's a bunch of girls here. I'm getting touched. This is whatever. Not obviously carry it on and like, you know, do further actions. But I think some girls might like that. And then some girls get really uncomfortable.
I think it's really always important to go back to where we were 30 years ago, whatever, 35 years ago. I don't think I ever went out with the expectation that I was ever going to be groped. I don't care how crowded the bar was. I never thought groping was something that would happen to me.
No, I never had that expectation either.
Okay.
Especially someone coming up from behind. I've had that happen in Europe on a train, but I definitely in college did not expect that from anybody. And coming up from behind is the most vulnerable.
Chez, you validated the blacklist thing because I'm a parent who was never in a sorority or a fraternity, nor was my husband, nor have my children been. So if I am like 50% of parents that are sending their children to school, I would definitely feel a need to tell my child, hey, there's this thing called a blacklist. Fuck the blacklist or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, don't worry about that. When my kids asked me for a fake ID, I was all about the fake ID. In a bar space where you have all different types of people, there's no like fraternity line. Like all the fraternity brothers are acting together and they don't want their fraternity brother. They call it the thin blue line of the people who protect the police, like other police officers protect police officers. I'm going to call it the thin fraternity line. There's none of that in a bar because you have people from all different walks of life. So in a bar, in some ways, you might be a little bit safer as a young female.
There's also like at the bars that I go to around my college town, there's always security and like, lots of workers too that I know keep an eye out for that kind of thing. I've seen them throw people out of the bar who have either started maybe a physical fight or like, making people feel uncomfortable. So that makes me feel a lot better going to the bar. I think it's a completely different environment, completely.
And I think if you're a parent, worrying about your child drinking is not the reason to not get them a fake ID. Like your child's going to drink or not drink. They're that kind of person, right? So, I mean, I'd love to actually do a survey of this with college students. Do you feel safer in a bar environment than someone's home?
I have to do a disclaimer. We're not saying to condone fake IDs in any way, but we have to do what we, are okay with as our own parents to our own kids and making these difficult choices. And that's a tough one. That's a really tough one because it's illegal and it can wind somebody up in jail. So we don't ever want to say that is the way or that it's better than a fraternity party, because I think the best prevention is to empower all people, women and men, boys, to feel the strength to say, get your hands off me, like knock it off. That should be okay without fear of blacklisted. And blacklisting, I mean, that's really hard to police, actually, I think.
I can't imagine that fraternity hierarchy can do anything about that.
I mean, come on. Yeah. And so I think
but that's intimidation. I mean,
it's intimidation, and don't buy into that. That's like,
if somebody were to say this to me about like, let's just say any kind of sexual behavior, and they said to me, if you don't do this, you're going to be on a blacklist, I would very clearly have an answer for you that is like you're exploiting someone's vulnerability, their power differential. That is like grounds for, if you were to proceed with any kind of sexual behavior, it would be sexual assaulty behavior. I feel like that's something no one's talked about on this show and very important.
What we're getting to, Steph, is that the dating game has changed so much that hello is let me grab your waist, or
I like you is a dick pic.
I'm interested in you is let me grab your waist, or let me send you a picture of my, body parts. And so what's that about? Like, how is that Hanna, as a college student, like, how did you meet your boyfriend? How are girls navigating this? If that's hello versus, hey, what's your name? Which it might have been back in the day. Instead, it's, I'm going to grope you in this dark party. And then are you supposed to like make out with them, or what happened? What's supposed to happen after that? Are you laughing
Yeah.
that I said make out, or were you laughing at
Oh,
Stephanie?
Am I supposed to make out with you after that?
right.
Are you supposed to grab my waist and then I turn around and like give you my tongue? Like
Oh,
what?
totally. I mean, there are some, like girl bosses out there who do turn around and are like, oh my God, stop touching me. But I mean, I would say that for the most part, the guys who do grab onto these girls' waists, they either, keep trying to feel for a little bit to get some sort of make out. And if they don't, they move on to the other person. I mean, you can see a guy go from like girl to girl to try and like get lucky with one of them eventually. A lot of it is them just kind of cycling through girls and waiting for one of them to, have the response of turning around and making out with them.
How did you, so you just then were like, this is ridiculous. I'm not
Yeah.
going to these parties. And you're this very, advanced, mature freshman, and you're figuring this out kind of pretty fast. So
Well,
does that mean your social life is very different, or your social life is non-existent, or what happened?
I think a lot of it is in high school, even like I always told myself, like, oh, I want to wait to be in a relationship till college. So I still did the aspects of like going out and, meeting guys and stuff like that. But I would say my big turning point was coming to college, experiencing like hookup culture, and it definitely leaves you feeling not good about yourself as a whole. I mean, and I think a lot of people agree with me too, but sometimes they're too scared to really like change anything about it, because I think a lot of it too is coming from like, oh, I don't want to be lonely, or I don't want to like not go out on the weekends and stuff. But for me personally, that kind of like mindset changed a lot for me, honestly, like just a couple months into college. And I was like, I'm not interested in this. I don't like Greek life. I don't like going out. I don't like, random hookups. I don't like being groped at frat parties. And then I think I just kind of like found the people that I meant to be friends with and be around in college, who kind of either feel the same way, or just like, not caught up in like what college is supposed to be, like just going out and drinking all the time, and like, having meaningless hookups and not talking about girls poorly. And then, that's when I like navigated and I found the right people that I'm supposed to be with. But ultimately, I think what really opened my eyes to not wanting to go out, and not that going out's like bad or whatever, but just like hookup culture is just personal experience. It never made me feel good about myself. I was never like gaining anything from it. And so yeah, I was just like, I'm done.
When you go to college, the socializing experiences that you can have are frat parties. I guess like if you're joining a sorority, I guess like those gatherings, which I think, also as a parent who has two children in big schools, there is something appealing about the idea of frat sorority life, because it's like this ready-made group of friends or whatever. The other opportunities would be if you did have a fake ID. And while I'm not advocating for that, I do think it's sad. It's sad that there are no spaces where 18, 19, and 20-year-olds can hang out alongside of people, or, on a different floor than people who are able to drink, where there's still like the nightclubby feel, because that's a good socializing environment, regardless of whether you drink or not. So that makes, I think there are some places like that. In fact, I remember my daughter in Texas, there were some bars where you could go in younger and kind of, you didn't have a wristband on or whatever.
Okay.
How do you navigate socializing when it's not Greek parties, or if you didn't have fake ID?
Yeah, so I would say it's a lot different when you're a freshman, because, most of the time when you're a freshman, you don't have your car, you're in a dorm, it's super small rooms. But I mean, I realized that I don't necessarily like going to frats in my freshman year. And I think me and all the girls that I surrounded myself with, just because we were all kind of on the same page, did resort to, on the weekends we can go out to the bars, or we can just all meet in someone's like dorm room and have a good time in someone's like dorm room. And there would be the group of girls that would go to a frat, there would be the group of guys that would go out to a bar, and then there would be the group of us that just kind of stayed back, and like, we could still like do our thing and like, drink or just like talk and catch up. And then once they were done, we would all meet back up. But it is a lot different now that I am in an apartment, just because I would say most of the people I surround myself with don't typically go out anymore just because I guess it didn't, people just don't really go out too much right now just because it's expensive and stuff like that. But a lot of people now, we just meet up in someone's apartment room and we're, doing our thing there. Like you go through freshman year and you do this and it gets boring really fast. And so then, I think it changes a lot after your first or even second semester for a lot of people, I would say too.
I was going to say two things. I'm really glad that you found your way for what works for you and that you're obviously very social and fun and whatever. So glad that you found your people and your way. What I noticed you said a couple times, Hannah, so I really want to hear more about this because Steph and I recently have talked a lot about shame, and Stephanie, has said shame is so disruptive and cancerous and horrible. And I heard you say a couple things about ruining reputations and blacklist, and then the words talking about girls poorly. So I really want to know your experience with that because it sounds like that there's this thing of if you're not a certain way, then you're talked about poorly or you're shamed with your reputation or you're blacklisted. We've already talked about that. But what was that about for you? What was your experience with somebody in some way, if that did happen to you or you just know about it, but in some way talking really poorly?
Yeah, I mean, as a whole, when I started becoming this different version of myself where I didn't really feel like going to frats, I mean, I was mostly just oh no, go out, don't be a loser, come on, let's go. And I mean, that kind of stuff never really got to me, but
You mean
uh,
people said that to you?
yeah, which
Okay.
that was also, again, when I first came to college. So my group of people that I had was way bigger than what it is now. And I guess those people just kind of filtered out of my life just because, I mean, they are a lot different than me currently still. But I mean, I don't know. I guess they would just kind of give me words of motivation to try and get me to go out and say things like, oh, don't be a loser. It's a Friday night or this and that. And I think a lot of the times too, I would honestly even say oh no, I can't afford it. Or, oh no, I don't have anything to wear or something like that. When in reality, I just, didn't really care to do it just because sometimes you don't want to be called a loser or you don't want people to think of you as a homebody in college, especially at a big party school. It's sometimes hard.
You know what? This is huge. This is really important for kids because you have to grapple with in your mind, am I willing to compromise myself to do something I don't want to do because I don't want to be thought of or called a loser? And then you figured out a coping strategy, which is really good, to just be like, nope, I don't have money this week, or nope, I don't have anything to wear, or whatever it is. I'm okay with that because you don't have to even give them an explanation, but it sometimes gets them off your back if you've got another excuse other than it's not fun. But are we allowed to say this isn't fun? This is shitty. This is gropey and I don't have fun with that. Are we allowed to say that?
It takes someone like Hannah to say that for other people to go yeah, why are we putting up with that?
Right. Yeah. For my experience, I mean, I obviously verbalized when that happened to me to my friends. And a lot of my friends didn't even like going out to frats from the beginning, but I think we all just had that mutual understanding. But I definitely still have a lot of friends that go out to frats and really enjoy it. They're out going fratting is what it's called every weekend. They do the wine nights that the frats host. They do all sorts of stuff still with the frat. And I mean, I don't take any offense to it because I have shared my stories or my friends have shared their stories with frats. I think a lot of them have the mindset of, oh, it hasn't happened to me yet. So not that I am hoping that they go through that whatsoever, but I'm sure one day there will be a time where they feel really uncomfortable or they feel like they have to do something or they get touched. And then hopefully it, kind of opens their eyes to how frats can be. And this isn't every single frat that I've gone to, but it has been a good majority of them. After I did, have a really bad mindset about frats, I never went to any except for one that my friend was in, and that I felt a lot more comfortable at just because, I knew a solid 8 guys in the frat, and I would just kind of only talk to them. But even then still, it's just kind of like, because I'm sitting here watching all their frat brothers that they supposedly are super close with doing the same things to other girls, you know?
Right.
I
Right.
think that's a really important point. First of all, let me just ask a couple of questions for clarity. You said a bunch of the people that I knew. Now, that sounds to me like you went to school with a bunch of people that you knew. Is that the case?
Yes, I did.
Okay. So, in some ways, that sets you up a little bit differently than people who go to school and they don't have friends that go with them. You know what I mean? Like a ready-made group of friends that they're going into college with. That's I
Totally.
think a huge difference, like
Oh, yeah.
they're still trying to find those friendships. It also makes me think though about something that I feel like is really important to repeat. And I've said this on maybe one or two other podcasts. It's that like these people, like whether they're the people who came into school without a ready set group of friends, they're going to a fraternity. Let's just say it's a female going to a fraternity.
Yeah.
She meets these guys, like you said, you met guys until you had your group of friends there, right?
Right.
And it's this trust that you're putting in these people that legitimately you actually don't know. And
Right.
that's what's scary to me because even people that we know, college life offers a completely different experience in life. You have
Yeah.
no parents, you don't have to go like if you're in a fraternity, you don't have to worry about you're getting home without drinking too much. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
drink with abandon. The behaviors that come out of you, you're not used to controlling in any way. So
Right.
you are believing that you have this relationship with these people, but you actually don't know them. You're a
Totally.
freshman.
I mean,
You really
I
don't know them. They could
totally.
really be rapey and assaulty. And I'm not suggesting that they are. I
Right.
say that because it is so important that we do not become vulnerable to these things. And the way we become vulnerable is feeling as though we trust people and also drinking a lot. That combination can be really deadly. And I say that about fraternities, not because all fraternities are rapey, not because I want to throw fraternities under the bus, but because historically and anecdotally,
It's just how it is.
fraternities come under a lot of scrutiny for their behavior and their rapey behavior.
And also, like, along with like the trust thing that you were talking about, I always grew up like with my parents telling me, when you do get to the point of like when you're drinking or whatever, never accept open drinks, never accept drinks from anyone. And I mean, not that I've like know of any frats that have done this, but I know that it has happened in the past, which a lot of the reason why a lot of our frats are banned is that drugging can be a thing or even at bars and stuff like that. And so I think that's another like thing of like, I could be a freshman going to a frat party and I'm just accepting these like red Solo cups filled with drinks of people that like I have no idea what's in them. Like I have no idea if someone's keeping an eye on me. Not that I, have like a specific example of that happening, but I know that it's happened in my university and I know that it's happened through other universities too.
Can we say to stop drinking red Solo cup drinks? Like that should just be a thing. Like tell your kid no red Solo cup drinks.
Right.
That's a mixed drink. You have no idea the portion of hard alcohol to whatever. If you're pouring a beer out of a keg, you have no idea whether something was dropped in there.
Oh, yeah.
Red Solo cup, like get a Truly.
And even
I'm not
if
suggesting
there's
drinking, but I'm saying something closed container is
right.
way better.
Even if there is like no like Solo cup aspect or of it, or like along with what we were saying with feeling like pressured by frat guys, a lot of like men will come up to you at a frat and like give you a drink and be like, oh, finish it. Oh, drink it all. Like, don't be a loser. Like drink all of your drink. And then, I mean, not that I'm pointing fingers, but again, once you do get drunk and vulnerable, I mean, some guys might take that, as advantage, and then try and like spin it however they want. But I've also witnessed that a lot at frat parties of like guys handing girls drinks and being like, oh, finish it, finish it.
And this is not fraternity only. I mean, this is happening.
No.
This happens at all parties. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
parties in general. I mean, we didn't have a lot of frats at my school, but this was parties in general,
Right.
Like it is dangerous to be drinking from a punch bowl. It is dangerous to be drinking a Jello shot. It is dangerous to be, honestly, smoking from a bong that someone hands to you. Like you have no idea what is in there. Like,
Exactly.
and
I have always been so skeptical. Every time I've gone, because I sadly, right when I graduated high school, I got drugged at a party And so coming to college, I have always been very, very like adamant of I don't drink at frats. I do the pregame and I don't drink at frats unless it's like a
Smart.
can that has not been opened yet, which typically there's not, because if you show up like even just 10 minutes late, all those like can drakes are already taken.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have always been very
Okay.
against that whole red solo cup kind of theory.
Mentality. Yeah. Hannah, that's really important. So you were drugged in high school at a high school party or at a bar or where?
Yeah, it was right after I graduated high school and we were all at a house party. I only knew a couple people there.
Were you the only one drugged or were there other girls that were drugged? And then what happened? Did you end up in the hospital? Did you end up being assaulted in any way?
Well, what happened was there was a guy that was there and a bunch of people were like, "Oh, like stay away from this guy. We're trying to get him out of here." But I had no idea who it was. And the only thing I really remember is being in line for the bathroom and this guy coming up to me, he handed me a drink, and I have learned so much from this. I was not thinking right. Had already been drinking, and he handed me a cup to drink, and then he was like, finish it, finish it." And so I finished it. And then the only thing I remember is waking up in the hospital, but it was very scary.
Who brought you to the hospital?
I somehow got back to my friend's house, and then her mom called the 911 because I was like incoherent and like just very shell shocked and out of it.
That is so scary.
Okay,
Mhm.
so now we know where you have this internal kind of warning signal to be like, I don't like this. I don't like this frat party thing, where it's potential to be a lot of things out of control again. And this does go to the point, Steph, that it's not just fraternity parties. That was a high school party of many high school. And
I was in a frat though, because there was like older.
oh,
He was in a frat. I did find that out.
okay. Okay.
But
Okay,
yes,
so there was that.
yeah.
But I guess the words like drink this up, drink this, and we might hear it as like chug, 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 or however people are going to say those things. You know, that's an interesting mandate to like
Yeah.
tell me to chug something. Why do you want me drunk?
Right.
And why do you want me to do this? So I think that this is a really important part of our conversation. I know we've said a lot, but I think this is really important, your experience with that, because it does help me understand why you would not find fraternity parties fun. And I'm so glad you're way beyond that. But you learned that really early that like, don't trust these people because you don't know what's going to happen.
Totally. That's the thing too, is like I don't hold grudges on all the people in Greek life or whatever, but it's like, after like just witnessing things in college and experiencing things like that before, it's kind of hard not to be really overly cautious with those people, and not that, again, that I'm like judging everyone in Greek life at all, but it just, for me personally, I'm so skeptical. I mean, I haven't gone to a frat in quite a while, but when I did go, I was always so skeptical. And it was more so like me always thinking, okay, when is someone gonna come up to me and approach me and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So on a positive note, how did you meet your boyfriend?
I met my boyfriend. He was, when we moved into our dorms last year, my freshman year, he was like 4 doors down from me. So on the first day of like moving in, each floor had like CAs and you would go and talk and got to meet people on your floor. So I met him there, and then I got super close with him just because, he was a couple doors down from me and we shared mutual friends. So we got really close really fast. He was one of my first friends in college.
Nice. So you were friends first, and
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. Okay. And I understand from what little I know that like your relationship sounds really healthy and very open and honest and healthy and mutually, just mutually satisfying. And so I think that that's important for people to know that I wonder if why girls put up with that stuff at parties is because they think, oh, I'm going to meet, a partner, or maybe guys put up with that too. I'm going to meet a partner. I'm going to meet the person I'm going to fall in love with. And I like that you've got this story of you met your boyfriend and your relationship's really healthy, and you met him somewhere totally different without alcohol, and you
Oh,
became
yeah.
friends first. Yeah.
It was a surprise to me too, honestly. I mean, again, not that I'm like some boy hating person, but my, interactions with guys, but prior to meeting him was always like, they're all kind of the same, want the same kind of things, just because that's what I've, even in high school, like the group of guys that I surrounded myself with as friends and hearing how they talk about girls and what their like ultimate goals are with girls is not really getting in a relationship, but doing everything else. And so that kind of like tainted my views on high school guys and college guys. But
That's
Yeah.
actually a really interesting question, which I think goes to the heart of the interactions that are happening in fraternities. So you're coming from an experience of guys of this generation, and you're hearing what? Like, what is the banter that makes you think that when you meet your boyfriend, this is someone who's different than the other people? Like, what is the standard protocol? And I do want to also say this, and you might be able to speak to this. We're talking about men being aggressively like physical with someone that they don't know. I have also heard from young men that women will like grab their package while walking through a bar or do things like that. I think there is this kind of like, oh, I'm a powerful woman. That may not happen at like a frat house. I imagine that probably wouldn't go over so great, or maybe it would go over great. I don't know. But I feel like it does happen in bars. It does happen in life that women can also get those messages that this is the way we are able to be now. It's just a, kind of we can touch other bodies without having explicit consent to do so, or that's acceptable, or it's sexy, or it's something like that. So they would be the two things. Like, what did you know of guys? Like, what is that you typically hear, and what made you say that wasn't for you? And then also, do you see that women are sometimes in the same way, a little bit, maybe not to the same extent, but aggressive with men?
yeah, so for the first part, I mean, I've always been like had a close group of guys growing up through high school. And then also in college, I met a lot of guys. And a lot of it was just, them referring to girls as like, there's like a lot of slang now around using the words like bad and like, stuff like that. It was never them saying like, oh, these girls are so pretty or oh, this. It was only talking about their body for the.
Wait. I'm sorry. Can you repeat? What is the word they would use?
Bad. It's like a term for, I don't even know. It's like they would say, for
Is it an
example,
acronym, or is it the term
it's an
BH?
adjective. It's like an adjective. Like oh,
Like
she's so bad.
nasty, like
Kind
in
of.
terms of like a good nasty, like, ooh, she's a nasty girl.
Kind of. Yeah. Along the lines of that.
Don't you laugh at me, Stephanie. She's known me forever, and I'm the farthest thing from.
She's a
Right.
nasty
No.
girl. I think that's from a
It is a
song.
song. It is a song, but that's what I
Oh,
mean.
that's Miss Jackson if you're nasty.
Nasty. Yeah,
Right.
it is Janet Jackson. No, but is it that? Is it like
I
she's
honestly, it's kind of, yeah, it's like it's definitely a sexual thing. Like she's
Yeah.
very bad. Like her body's very, I guess, yeah, sexy, nasty, that kind of. I honestly don't really know too much. I just know that a lot of men use that. They also are very explicit in talking about, like, if they, hook up with a girl, they'll talk about like every single detail you can imagine, which is just obviously not good to talk about with, people that aren't, there. But yeah, for the most part, my experience of like guys' language and like thoughts about girls are just so sexual. And it's, you know, they only talk about girls and like wanting to hook up with them or like, talking about how big of boobs they have and just like stuff like that. It's never been, oh my gosh, that girl's so pretty. I want to get to know her ever.
Never.
Okay, I want to say something because this is so interesting that we do this. I'm looking up Urban Dictionary for bad, and it's describing the male-female appearance in a good way. Bad meaning you have a great body and it's fit. So that's hysterical. We love to like turn stuff around like in a big way. So now we have to figure that out. Then when you say I'm bad, it really means I'm have a good body. Yeah.
Yeah.
How funny is that? So the fact that you just said, and this has been since the dawn of days too, but that if you have a sexual experience with someone, you can pretty much guarantee that they're going to share it with their friends.
Oh,
And
so
maybe they're going to share it with, like you're saying, everyone.
Right.
Okay, wait, I have, this is going to be a complete tangent that
Okay.
that we may not recover from, and it may lead us down a path, but it reminds me of what I think happens and where I think a lot of insecurities in bodies come in. Do they also talk about like genitalia? Like specifically, what I remember when we were growing up, somebody would say somebody was bad or good in bed. Really, they wouldn't have any other like at least I don't recall that. Chez, do you recall like maybe like, oh, they were a sloppy kisser, or like I can remember people saying like, oh, she's like a dead fish.
Bad breath.
Dead.
Well,
Huh?
it's definitely a lot more
Bad
graphic.
breath.
Yeah, well, yeah,
Oh,
things like
none
that.
of it.
Things
So
like
and so had really bad breath.
But
Yeah.
I think that like a dead fish would be like, and I don't mean that in like smell term. That's a really bad thing to say about a woman, but like it was more meant in like she didn't move in bed.
Right.
Is today the comments about females' bodies more graphic? I think I heard you say.
Yes. I've definitely heard some things that are a lot more, graphic towards women's bodies. And it's just so uncomfortable to like hear that kind of stuff because I know that if I was the girl, I would never want that to be talked about with me. But I mean, it can go as little as just talking about how they're a bad kisser, or it can go as much as to say like her, vagina isn't tight enough, or it's like tastes so bad, or it smelled so bad, like just stuff like that. And they'll leave nothing out. They'll, definitely talk poorly about girls' bodies that they just had sex with, which is really disappointing.
Can I ask you a question on before I go into that, because it's like one of my things that makes me crazy, but on the reverse side, were girls talking about like what kind of negative talk would there be about a guy that they had sex with or that they fooled around with?
See, I've never really, as far as like my girlfriends go, I've never really heard a girl talk like that bad about a guy in bed. I mean, the only thing that I've heard is one of my friends lost their virginity to another guy who also was a virgin. And it was like, oh, like he went down on me and it didn't feel like how I thought it would, like stuff like that. But it's never been that graphic really ever. And those are like my really close girlfriends. But no, I've never heard of a girl talking really poorly about a guy's body after they like have sex with them or anything like
So
that.
I'm going to chalk this up to one of our anecdotal stories about the difference in the way that we shame, because shame is my big thing. Don't shame anyone in front of me, but how we shame females about their body. And I'll tell this story because I haven't told it on this podcast, though I've mentioned it many times in my classroom. And I think it's really important. When my oldest daughter was about 15 years old, Harry Styles was in town. And I was bringing them back from the concert, and I heard that there was like a group of like 6 girls in the back of the car, and I heard them talking about DJ Khaled. I think that's how you say
Oh
it.
yeah.
Never tell if it's Khalid or Khaled, whatever. Whoever the hell he is. He's
Right.
not important because of the story I'm going to tell you. Don't like him. Anyway, they're in the back and they're talking about, oh, how he won't go down on his wife. And I'm like, hold on, what's going on back there? And they're like, oh, DJ Khaled said that, he wouldn't go down on his wife. And I'm like, why is that? And they're like, all 6 of them, 15 years old,
Yeah.
all 6 of them were kind of like in unison. Well, you know why? And I'm like, no, I have no idea why DJ Khaled won't go down on his wife. And they're like, because girls smell. And I was like, girls, right now, I am going to tell you something. Your vulva, your vagina is amazing. It gives birth. It cleans itself. It's
Right.
beautiful. It is an amazing gift from God. It will give you pleasure. And I'm going to say the same thing. I can't stand shame because let me tell you something. Anybody who does not take care of their personal hygiene runs the risk of having smelly genitalia, male or female, right?
Yeah.
So all of this shame is meant to, I think, it's meant to level the playing field. A girl has too much power. I'll just tell her that her vagina smells, or that some guy said she smells like a fish. This is a way to level the playing field. Everybody needs to learn personal hygiene. Some people, you're making out with them and they have pimples on their face. Like, we're not making fun of that. That's part of growth. That's part of learning. But all bodies are beautiful. They're made, they're not disgusting, they're not smelly. When taken care of and without any sort of sexually transmitted infections, they're beautiful.
Right.
I hate that narrative. I hate discussions around male genitalia, the size, all this kind of stuff. And I hate it around female genitalia. We know who we are. If you want to get the best from your partner, so I told you this is going to be a tangent, but if you want to get the best out of your partner, there is no better way to have an amazing experience with a partner than when your partner is embodied. They are living in their body. They are feeling all the feels. They are enjoying and able to reciprocate the love and the energy that you're giving them. There is no faster way to put the brakes on to make an experience absolute shit than when you make them self-conscious and shameful about what their body is. End of
Totally.
story.
100%. Yeah.
And
That's
if
my
these
that's my tangent.
conversations, if these conversations are happening by, I think it is Khalid, but DJ Khalid is saying this about his wife to
Right.
the public.
And the
So
fact
that
that
15-year-olds, I mean, I'm like,
There's also that kind of stuff in like song lyrics too, like
yeah.
talking about, all that kind of stuff.
So it's shaming women. And I'm here to tell you that we all have pheromones. We all have different smells and at different times too. It's cyclical because we're meant to, just like any animal, like we all kind of mate and procreate and all that kind of stuff. And I think like animals, there are different smells at different times of the month based on our periods, based on all those things. But I have to say, I won't use the word shame, but shame on DJ Khalid or whatever the heck your name is for saying that about his wife. So that
Right.
15-year-olds, I mean, how immature is this dude? Like, what the heck?
Well, do you see what I'm saying? Also, I think that like there is, I mean, even if you look at it psychologically, women in general are more selective about who they have sex with, right? Evolutionarily, it makes sense. You don't
Right.
want to have sex and get impregnated by somebody who can't help you keep the family healthy, fed, going out,
Right.
the hunter going out. And so it makes sense. Men need to spread their seed. So we have an advantage because somebody who likes us, we are a challenge to them. That is just,
Right.
that's just facts. I don't care what anybody says. So, but so when you think about that, guys who will get turned down more readily by a girl, they have a reason kind of want to knock her down a peg. It's like, oh, well, whatever. So shame is a big way to shut up somebody who maybe rejected you, doesn't feel the same way as you. Maybe they are so much above you that someone else is going to perpetuate a lie. So I think that we should all make a conscious effort to not repeat things that we hear about people, to encourage people to not talk about body parts. It's just it actually serves the exact opposite purpose of what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you want to be with a female, if you want to be with a male, if you want to have beautiful, when you are in those intimate sexual relationships, and I'm not saying everyone should get into them, but when you're in them, you want your partner to be embodied, not disembodied and in their head. You want them to be loving everything about them, every curve, every smell, everything about themselves. That's the best way to have amazing, connected, intimate relations.
100%. I agree.
Now I understand a little more, Hanna, too, about why if I heard guys say those kind of things, and not that I haven't, but I would be really careful too. So I understand kind of this whole like careful road that girls today and women have to have of like, okay, I'm going to be really careful because I don't want to be talked about. I don't want to be shamed. But then I also want a relationship. But then I like, how is everybody supposed to figure this? So anyway, in the time that we have left, I think these are big topics about what's going on today. And a lot of this has been around for a while, I'm sure. But you guys both brought up trust. So like, how do you then develop trust with people based on all these things. If our movie stars and rappers, like I don't trust that person. So, and then you don't trust the person that's going to grab you from behind at a frat party, and then you don't trust the person that's going to hand you a drink and say chug. So then how does your internal meter figure out I can trust somebody? I know what I do, but what do you do, Hannah?
I mean, personally, for me, it's just a lot of like, getting to like, again, like with me and my boyfriend, like, or just any guy, for example, if anyone does approach me or, whatever, I think a lot of what kind of steers me in the wrong direction is not even getting that, what we were talking about earlier, like just the hello from the beginning. I think you could totally like, filter out the people who actually like want to get to know you and like genuinely like you as a person from like the first time meeting them. I mean, that's I think why a lot of people just like click instantly is because you can tell they're like, already interested in you and they actually like care about learning, like getting to know you. So for me, I mean, it's all about first impression. And I feel like I can, trust my gut and whether I trust people or not from my first experience with them. Like if they ask about myself and like where I'm from and, school and all that kind of stuff compared to just, oh, what are you doing tonight? Are you busy after this? Like stuff like that. I think that you can get a lot of someone's character and how important you are to them based off just your first interaction with meeting them, if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. I think you earn trust, and so that's what you're showing examples of it's not really earning trust if you're not willing to even look at me or ask my name or, those kind
Totally.
of things.
Even with just like my guy friends too. I mean, I have a selected, group of guy friends that where some of them I can trust and some of them I can't. And not that it's, whatever, but just kind of how their character is, I guess, and how, I hear them talk about other girls or how I just hear them talk about people as a whole. There's definitely just, even from my guy friends that I'm just friends with, there's only a selected few that I can actually genuinely trust.
Yeah. And if people talk about other girls a certain way, they talk about every person that way. Like that's the way you are is the way you are, and you
And it's the
show.
same with, like, my female friendships too,
Yeah.
and if I'm, like, talking with one of my girlfriends and they're, like, openly talking crap about someone that they were just hanging out with and they're supposedly friends with, like, for me, it's just, like, a red flag, and I'm just like, "Oh, I can't trust that you don't say the same kind of things behind my back."
I could not agree more. I think that's really, really smart. I I think that how people show you who they are, you know? I mean, they're not going to be a whole lot different with you than they are with other people. If somebody doesn't have a problem knowing that their friend is cheating on their boyfriend and they're not going to tell their friend that like their friend's boyfriend is cheating on them and they're not going to tell them that, they're not going to tell you either. You know, they're showing you who they are. And I think the other thing, and I'd like to say this because I'm sure that like grabbing you from behind is just one example. I'm sure there are other things that happen at frat parties that maybe you're not thinking about or you've forgotten or but I've heard of guys sticking their hand up someone's skirt and
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I really want to know what this guy is thinking. Like, does he really think that he's going to stick his hand up your skirt and then you're going to be like, "Oh my God, I've so wanted to make out with you. I've so wanted to have a date with you." Like, duh,
Right.
that is literally the worst thing. But I think grabbing someone from behind might be a little bit more innocent. Okay, I'm just going to say innocent because it's
Yeah.
not with your hand. But if I think about it this way, and sometimes it's important to like take someone out of and take their behavior out of context. And I think, what if some creepy old guy from a bar walked up and put his hands on your waist? What if some creepy old woman went up and put their hands on that guy's waist or down on his ass? How would they feel? And so you can't go like, "Oh, this guy's cute and he's popular in the fraternity and he did this to me and I feel flattered." His behavior is still unacceptable if you take it out of the context and you take away the looks because you're literally judging him by how he looks and his level of popularity rather
Yeah.
than saying as a character trait, who does that?
Right.
Who is creepy enough to go up behind someone and grab them by the waist that they don't know?
And
It's one thing if
yeah.
you're walking up to your friend and you're like, "Oh," you tickle them on the waist.
Right.
That's something altogether different than someone who doesn't know you, who's coming in crossing a boundary.
Right.
And guess what? They're only getting away with it because they're cute and because maybe they're popular in the fraternity, right?
Right.
But like,
And they're surrounded by all their like frat brothers too, which it just being in that environment makes them feel safe. And I think a lot of these people, which we've kind of already touched on, but I think a lot of the guys, the reason why they just go straight for the gun and just, touch girls is just because they don't care about the interacting part. They solely are doing that so they know, is this girl going to give me what I want? If not, we can go on to the next one. So I think that's fully what all that is about, which is horrible, but I totally think that they just don't care enough to do the interacting part. They're just jumping straight to the gun, gonna touch these girls, see how they, go about it. And then if they don't, you know, advance in it, then they move on to the next one until they
that's
get
like,
what they want.
I feel like this. Okay, so I was just talking to a girlfriend of mine, and we were talking about your generation specifically because, you grew up with all of the, texting, and like my kids didn't even really have sleepovers, which, is good and it's bad, but like the socialization changed entirely. And my son in particular, he was in high school and they had masks on and dividers between the things, and kids were already on their phones. So now they're in a mask, looking down, looking at their phone, getting into class behind
Right.
a shield. The socialization aspect is absolutely gone. So to me, it's just unbelievable that somebody would think if I grab your waist and you respond positively, oh, there's a chance we're going to hook up.
Right.
When back in the day with Dr. Chez and I, like you would literally be at a bar, someone would come up next to you, say, hey, can I buy you a drink, or start talking to you? And you might look at them and at first glance be like, so not my type. And I'm not
Right.
even kidding you. I've had just as many people go from so not my type to definitely not my type as have gone from so not my type to, oh, that guy's actually quite funny and really
Right.
charming, and I really enjoy his company. But you're missing all of that. Like they don't even understand that it's not even like that protocol. It's like a protocol makes it sound very like something from the government, handed down, but it's just like social norms. They don't
And
even understand those social norms.
right. And I mean, I don't think that because being in this generation and experiencing that, it's like you kind of have to like look at the factors, and it's like it's not for my parents because, like seeing how your parents like grew up, or them talking about like how they met your father and all that kind of stuff. It's not from necessarily like movies, because I mean movies don't, exploit that kind of stuff in such a like a gory graphic kind of context. And then you have to like really look at like, okay, then how did this generation get to this point where they think that's kind of stuff is normal and okay? And you kind of limit it down. And I mean, kind of what we were talking with on the phone earlier, where it's like porn and it's media and it's songs and it's all these like rappers nowadays that have, all this money and all this fame, and like how they're talking about women in their songs and like just stuff like that. And like, I totally think that that is what altered this generation to make them think that it's just like now this is just how they are now. And
That's
like this is
excellent observations.
yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent observation. It didn't come from your parents.
No.
It doesn't come from mainstream movies because most of them it's a like the story structure is there's a beginning, a high point, and then it like wraps up. Like so
Right.
you like plot points. You can't just start by grabbing someone and that.
Yeah. Like when you're growing up and like you're in elementary school and you have a little crush on a girl because she's super sweet, or she plays soccer with you at recess or whatever. And then you just kind of get to that certain like point where you're more exposed and you're, hearing about all this other stuff. And then your just mindset, I guess, just gets like manipulated into thinking that that's what's normal. And not even gonna lie, that's kind of like what my mindset went from too, because when I was exposed to that kind of media and just like talk about sex or relationships and even middle school and then beginning of high school, I was like, gosh, like, are women not supposed to be, having like good sexual relations, or like are they not supposed to be enjoying themselves as much as guys are? And it like honestly, like I questioned it for quite a while until I realized, oh my gosh, no, that's not normal. That's not how it's supposed to be.
And that is the norm, I think, that girls it is very confusing, and that they are confused and think that that's what the normative is supposed to be. And until we question it and open up these kinds of conversations, yeah, people don't know or don't think about it.
Like, what you consume is what you believe. So
Oh,
if
yeah.
you want to have if you want to have better relationships, if you want to have better interactions with people, you can't be listening to music that's calling women bitches and hoes. Like,
Right.
you can't. You
Okay.
can't.
Hannah, to wrap this up, I would love to hear from you. I don't know if you have siblings. Do you have any younger siblings?
I have an older siblings.
Okay. So I would love to hear from you. If you had a younger sibling, what 3 things from our conversation would you advise or say to somebody younger? And let's say it's a girl. I mean, it could be a boy too, but let's say, whoever you choose. What 3 things from this conversation have kind of solidified enough for you that you would be like, okay, this is really important for people to know?
Totally. There's so many because I've always dreamt of having like a younger sibling. But I think one of the really big ones would be like no matter what part in your life that you're in, whether you're in elementary, middle, high school, college, anything, is to just do what you want and not feel like not as good about yourself or whatever just because you don't find the same things interesting or fun or have the same hobbies as other people. I think that also like everything that's meant to be will be. And like if you don't find your people out at a frat party or out at a bar, then you're gonna find your people in like a class of yours or in a club or anything like that. And I fully stand by that. So that would be the first thing, is to just do what you want to do in college or with your life or anything, because just faking it till you make it sometime isn't going to work. Like pretending like you like going out and drinking is just not, you don't have to do that kind of stuff in college. The second one would probably just be, like just remember the power of just like being able to say no. Like you can say no to anything and everything you want in like a sexual context or just like again with going out. So definitely really heavy on that, the power of no. And then also probably, just this is kind of a more like deeper kind of thing, but don't feel left out or not as good about yourself if you aren't, let's say you're like my younger sibling is like 13, or like some of her friends are starting to like hook up with boys or have boyfriends. Don't think of yourself any less, or think about your body as any less because you aren't engaging in these activities. Because I see that with a lot of girls and with a lot of like even just freshmen here, their priorities are like hooking up with guys and stuff. And for the girls that don't do that, they feel so bad about themselves and they start questioning why it's not happening to them. So I think that I would use that and almost like flip that in a way of like, think of that as power. Like you aren't giving your body away to people. You aren't as easy to, have. So I would definitely, you know, reinterpret that, because that message has been completely not talked about enough, and like how it should be normalized to also not participate in that stuff if you don't want to, and not just for a religious reason or something like that. Like it's completely also normal to not be hooking up with a bunch of guys or not be in a relationship right away.
Awesome.
Thank you,
Okay.
Hannah. I think that was a great conversation and should be very illuminating to parents and young people who are about to go off to college, or maybe in college somewhere and feeling like they're the only one who feels this way. They're not alone.
And maybe going to a party tonight, and maybe somebody will feel that they can say, get your hands off me.
Yeah.
Exactly. Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You're awesome. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Hanna.
everything you shared. That was
Yes,
awesome.
of course. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for trusting us with your stories.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Chez Leeby and Stephanie Boye based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guest that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7onsundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.